Today's rule covers 3 items. The first item is a bill to ban imports of Russian oil into the United States and to impose additional sanctions following Russia's unprovoked and unjust invasion of Ukraine. Madam Speaker, although I will be supporting this bill, I cannot help but feel that this is a half measure and a missed opportunity to exhibit unified support on immediate steps to confront Putin's evil regime. Yesterday, Senators Wyden and Crapo introduced a much stronger bill, one that was negotiated over the weekend by Republicans and Democrats in both the House and the Senate. But rather than taking yes for an answer, the majority instead put forward a weaker bill, one that's watered down and leaves loopholes wide enough to drive a tanker through. Banning Russian oil imports in the wake of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine should be an obvious no-brainer, just as it ought to be a no-brainer for the President to reverse his misguided policies and unleash development of America's own energy sources. But instead of doing so, the Biden administration continues to discourage domestic oil and gas production and is asking every other oil producer in the world to make up the difference. Instead of encouraging our own domestic sources of energy, which could meet our needs, critically supply our allies, and strengthen American energy independence, President Biden has instead taken steps like unilaterally canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, imposing a ban on new oil and gas exploration and leasing on federal lands, and telling hard-working Americans who are struggling to buy expensive gasoline to instead go buy more expensive electric vehicles. Failing to develop America's energy resources is a missed opportunity, Madam Speaker, just like this bill. We had a better option. I wish we had taken it. Our second item today is an omnibus appropriations package covering the remainder of the year 2022, and the third is a short-term continuing resolution to ensure continuity of government funding while Congress processes the larger bill. Madam Speaker, it's been a very, very long road to get to this point. But today the House will act on a bipartisan, bicameral appropriations package. As Vice-Ranking Member of the Appropriations Committee, I'm encouraged that we are finally nearing completion of this fundamental function of Congress to provide full-year funding for the government. We are here today in a time of great crisis. 2 weeks ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin launched an unprovoked and unjust war against Ukraine, its democratic neighbor to the west. Inflation has skyrocketed to a 40-year high, and due to the administration's reckless action, gas prices have continued to soar month after month after month. Yet despite these crises, the members of this body have worked together and have found common ground on today's legislation. As I've said many times, one of the most consequential duties of a member of Congress is to fund the government and keep it open and operating. At a time of crisis, this is more important than ever. Last year, the Appropriations Committee passed all 12 appropriations bills out of committee and succeeded in passing 9 of those bills across the floor before the August recess. Unfortunately, these bills were partisan and did not receive support from any Republican members, and with good reason. Today, we are 5 months into fiscal year 2022, and despite the long process, the road forward has always been clear. It was clear last July, just as it's clear today, that in order to reach a final bipartisan, bicameral deal on appropriations for FY 2022, 4 conditions needed to be met. I'm greatly pleased that in this bill meets all 4. The first is to ensure that the long-standing bipartisan pro-life provisions historically included in the appropriations bills are restored. These include the Hyde Amendment, which prevents federal dollars from being used to pay for abortions, except in the limited cases of rape, incest, and life of the mother, and the Weldon Amendment, which protects American doctors, nurses, and other health care professionals from participating in and providing abortions if they have a moral objection. The inclusion of these and other broadly popular provisions was and is an absolute necessity for this bill to have any chance of becoming law. I'm personally deeply grateful that they are included in this package. Second, partisan policy riders that were included in the bills that passed the House last summer needed to come out. These are provisions that both sides did not agree to and do not enjoy bipartisan consensus. At the end of the day, we needed to reach an agreement on these items to move forward, and fortunately, each of these provisions has been removed. Third, the level of defense spending absolutely needed to come up. Unfortunately, last year, President Biden proposed a budget that underfunded national defense, repeating the mistake of the Obama-Biden administration of chronically underfunding our national defense. But earlier this year, the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee, both controlled by Democrats, worked together in a bipartisan manner to authorize an increase in defense spending of $25 billion over the fiscal year. In today's bill, appropriators actually went beyond that, ensuring a robust increase in defense spending. This increase is necessary to ensure that our armed forces will have the funds needed to maintain our readiness and to procure the weapons and assets the warfighters of tomorrow will need to continue to succeed on the battlefield. This includes increases for defense assets based in my own home state of Oklahoma. If the present crisis in Ukraine shows us nothing else, it should show us the need to continue to adequately fund our national defense. Finally, the fourth condition that needed to be met was that the proposed levels of non-defense spending had to come down. In the initial set of bills that passed the House, my friends in the majority sought to include a 17% increase in non-defense spending. While that no doubt included many worthy items, Republicans generally felt that 17% was excessive, particularly given the substantial needs on the defense side of the ledger. But the bill before us today increases non-defense spending by just 6.7%. which will allow the increased investments, will allow for increased investment in key areas while also ensuring that we will continue to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. Of course, this 6.7% ensures that there will be significant and important investments in non-defense areas across the government. I'm particularly pleased that the National Institutes of Health will receive a robust $2.25 billion increase, which will help advance medical science, help address future pandemics, and continue our progress toward defeating the scourge of cancer. We are also funding ARPA-H, one of the President's highest priorities, at $1 billion in its first year of operation. I'm also encouraged that this bill provides significant increases for TRIO, Gear Up, two programs that are close to my heart that help first-generation students go to college. These are just a few of the programs that I could point to that are worthy of increased funding and investment, and this bill has done that. The legislation before us today represents a negotiated compromise between the House and the Senate, and obviously between Democrats and Republicans. Given that it's a compromise, that means neither side got everything that they wanted. As I've often said, in a compromise, you have to give up more than you'd like to get less than you want. Indeed, this is not the bill I would have written had I written it alone. But at the end of the day, it represents a good balance for Congress and for the nation. Before I finish, I want to congratulate my friends and colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, particularly Chairwoman Rosa DeLore and Ranking Member Kay Granger, without whom we would not have gotten to where we are today. And I also want to extend my huge thank you, as my Chairman did, to the Appropriations Committee staff and to the Rules staff on both sides of the aisle. These staffers are truly unsung heroes who spent many long and sleepless nights over the preceding weeks, including the past weekend. We would not be here without them today. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.